we get started, just a few words about Zoom, about the format of this particular session. So as you see, you are currently muted. In about 45 minutes or so during the Q&A, we'll be happy to unmute you. You can just basically let us know in the Zoom that you, in the chat rather, that you do have a question. And at that time, we'll be happy to unmute you so you can actually ask a question live to our panelists. But in the meantime, do please feel free to use the chat function to ask questions, to interact with us, with other folks at CCA, with the panelists, amongst yourself. The way that this is going to work is for the first, like I said, 45 minutes or so is going to discussion, presentations, and so on and so forth. The last 15 minutes or so will be a Q&A with you very much at the center. And the last half hour, at the top of the hour, basically starting at the top of the hour, we'll have breakout rooms. And so we'll be joined by one more person, one of the CCA's fellows called James McCoy from Nevada, where he'll be able to introduce himself, talk about the work that he has done and is doing in Nevada. And then we'll provide you with the opportunity to join breakout rooms with each of our panelists. So if you have a specific question or just want to chat with each of them, you'll have an opportunity to do that. And you also have an opportunity to hop in and out of different rooms. So if you want to have a quick conversation with James and then with Betty, you'll be able to do that. And CCA behind the scenes will be able to make that happen. So basically, the way that we're looking at the breakout rooms is very much like at the end of the presentation at a normal conference, when you just walk up to the desk and have a conversation with the presenters. That's pretty much what we're looking at. We will not be sharing the PowerPoint, and you'll see why. The PowerPoints are very much very small and not something that have a lot of content inside. But we are recording the session, and you'll be able to access the video through our virtual attendee hub until the rest of this year. Also, talking about the virtual attendee hub, if you haven't had a chance, we do have a video today from New Hampshire, supported by a partnership with Bar Foundation. So I would strongly encourage you to do this. And again, we strongly encourage you guys to interact with us through Twitter by using the hashtag equity and justice for all. So let's get started. There you go. So yesterday, CCA unveiled its new framework for strategy. So if you are unable to join us, we'll share a link in the chat about a video that provides a little bit more context, like about a different the policies, the advocacy, as well as our 4 pillars here. Today's session really is going to focus on our first pillar and purpose. Purpose and how we can basically support institutions in closing their performance gaps. And that's something that I want to make sure we're very clear here at CCA, and that I want to share with you is that when we talk about equity gaps, we're really talking about institutional performance gaps. The onus of closing equity gaps does not rely on the students. It's really on the institutions. We want to make sure that schools have and understand that they have the responsibility to ensure that all students have the necessary tools to be successful. So if we want to choose and to close and eliminate equity gaps in higher education, we need the institutions to address why all students are not progressing or graduating at the same rate. So at CCA, we define purpose as aligning the college experience to each student's goals. So we need to help students facilitate finding for the students to finding their why. So why are they interested in attending college? Why are they pursuing this degree? Why did they choose this particular program of study? Why do they want this career job, this career or this job? And for the institutions, really, our role is really to answer with the how. How will college actually help you achieve your goal? How will this program help you gain the knowledge and competencies needed to get that job? How will those courses prepare you to grow and progress? And how is this degree relevant to what you want to do? And unfortunately, too often, we assume that students know their whys and understand the hows. And you know what happens when you assume. I mean, so we can't take for granted that students are up to speed about the job market. They're knowledgeable about all the choices of the programs of study at your institutions, or even that they know about their declared majors, whether or not they're a good fit for them. So too often, really, students who have the fewer resources often have the least amount of information. So for them, the why and the how are not always based on research or data or personal experience because their access to these things are minimal. That means that defining purpose for most minoritized students and supporting them finding their why has a major impact and a significant outcome for them. So in the last few months, with COVID, job losses, and of course, with the continued persistence of systemic racism, Black and Latin communities have been disproportionately impacted. So for our students, and especially for Black and Latinx students, time and money, time is still the enemy. To use the phrase that we use, that CCA is used for a lot of things. So time and money are not disposable for our students. Exploration is good and should take place, but for most, exploration is luxury that unfortunately comes at a cost, at the expense of student success. So students, and this is where I really want to emphasize with the purpose, is that students shouldn't be left to figure this out on their own. And if we want to make an equitable economic recovery, we must be more intentional on how we reach out to these communities and how we support students by providing them with relevant information. So to close their performance gaps, school must provide tools and resources for students to make informed decisions. And it's not enough to just create, to compile the information and create a great website. We must make sure that we engage the students with that information and that we have students engage with that particular information as well. Because again, we can't take for granted that students have the means or the resources to actually access the information. If anything, COVID has shown that many of our students do not have access to Wi-Fi or laptops, or even know that the resources are actually available on your school website. And let me be quite honest, a lot of times websites are a maze that only those who basically work on it on a daily basis know how to navigate successfully. Another critical deficit that purpose pillar addresses is the underrepresentation of Black and Latinx in some cases in Black and women also in programs that lead to higher paying jobs. And likewise, there's an overrepresentation of Black and Latinx students in programs that lead to lower paying job. And why is that? It has nothing to do with aptitude or desire or because they don't want to be successful. Rather, it's because a lack of information and exposure. And in a lot of cases, again, let's be quite honest, there's an implicit bias where some students are encouraged to pursue some majors and not others. And something that yesterday, Dr. Estelle Bensmon called salvationism. So where some people may mean well by helping, by saying, this, you really should follow this particular path and so on and so forth, when all it does really is, reinforce inequities and lower outcomes, quite honestly, for some students. So institutions, again, have to create mechanisms and tools and resources, provide them to students for them to make informed decision for their purpose and helping them, again, be partners in providing them with the why. So some of those mechanisms and resources align with strategies purpose pillar. Now, before we get started, and very quickly, those lack of resources, I recognize that not every institution has all the resources available to do this at a scale, but ideally, all these strategies should be made available to every single student, not just the undeclared students, because the one thing we know is that declared does not mean decided. How many times have you actually had students change majors because it wasn't what they thought it was going to be? And that's a problem. And the worst thing actually is then we let them choose another major without providing with the necessary information. And then they just basically swirl and swirl with the hope that hopefully they get something that, a major that actually fits their interests. Now, we all know that hope is not an effective success strategy for student success and retention. So the first strategy that we're looking at is first year experience. And I'm a huge fan of the first year seminars, I used to oversee them at Georgia State. But what we're talking about here at first year experience strategy is not just a first year seminar that allows for students to start exploring through, assignments and things like that about their majors or careers that they're potentially interested in, but really the entire structure of the first year, starting with onboarding, starting with the application, the admission, the orientation, academic advising, career counseling, the assessment tools that are available and provided to students, major fairs, and so on and so forth. So all that structure that happens as early as possible that allows students to explore, to come up with the information, again, make informed decision. Career exploration should be done early, should be done often. Again, this should not be a passive experience by a school that provide those tools and a great website. So we can't take for granted that students are aware of those resources or that they're in a position to avail themselves of those resources. So whether through a first year seminar course, academic advising, the admissions process, experiential learning, students should be made to engage with this information. So whether to confirm their interests and set even more concrete goals, or for students to find out other potential interests and other potential majors that are better aligned with their interests and their skills and their original goals. So to me, knowledge is power. Go Schoolhouse Rock. So let's give that power to students. Academic and career alignment. This is where really we need to make the connection between what students are learning and what they hope to do with their degree clear and explicit. So for the most part, we tend to include learning outcomes on the syllabus, but what about competencies? Why not include learning competencies or career competencies on the syllabus as well as every single department website, degree maps, the learning outcomes, career competencies should be front and centered, and we should be able to actually, make the students realize the relevance of what they're doing. So connecting the dots for the students as to the relevance between what they're studying and what they need to learn for their major and their career. And to me, this particular strategy is a great opportunity for institutions to connect with their alumni, connect with their regional employers, to have a conversation about what are the preferred competencies in the job markets for each program and for careers associated with these particular programs. So again, the relevance aspect of it between course and goal, that should be clear. And again, if you should ask, if you talk to students, that should come up with, students should be able to explain very quickly, what am I learning in this class applies to my potential career. And finally, the adult learner engagement as a fourth strategy under the purpose pillar. And everything I've been talking about, purpose applies specifically to adult and very well to adults. If anything, adult learners have even less time to make up their minds about their programs or whether or not they should invest their precious time in doing a degree at your institution. So they might be a little bit better equipped to communicate what they're interested in, but that doesn't mean that they have all the tools at their disposals. Talk about the job market, labor market data, how much, if they were to switch potential careers, are there better job openings? Is it a little bit more secure? Is it higher salaries and things like that? So in this instance, relevance information for students, for adults, is even more critical. So very quick, or maybe not, depending on how you look at it, survey of the different strategies here under purpose. What I want to do is move away from the purpose pillar, if you will, and bring in rather our two panelists today, Betty Fortune and Paul Timmons. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves a little bit and talk about their work at their institutions and their system and how it actually connect with purpose and help students. So Betty, I yield the floor to you.
Thank you, Nicholas, and the CCA team for having me today. I serve at Houston Community College as the Executive Director for Success and Completion. This is a very unique position in that it allows me the opportunity to observe and report on all the success data throughout the institution. We are a 6 college institution, but we are accredited as one. And each of those colleges have very unique populations. However, at the end of the day, the institution as a whole is very diverse. Our largest population that we serve currently are Hispanic students, and second would be our African American students. We also have the Caucasian or white students are moving further out into the four-year institution, so that population at the community college is declining. But for certain, we see the disparity between these populations, be it age, ethnicity, pale, so forth and so on. But there is a lot of disparity there. And we first became involved with the purpose strategies as a part of our guided pathways work here in Houston. It was at a very, very good time that we became familiar with these strategies, because we were discovering that students were not graduating. We have a high percent of part-time students as opposed to full-time students. And the majority of the part-time students, I think the on-time graduation rate was 2%. And so we had a lot of issues and concerns that we were concerned with. And so when we were exposed to the purpose strategies, it was like, this is an aha moment. This is going to help us as we begin to review all of our policies, our practices, and our processes in order to help students succeed. So in doing so, with the purpose first thought of beginning with the end in mind, that's when we first began our work. And I'll explain more of this as we continue with the conversation.
Thank you. Paul.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Paul Timmons, and I am the Executive Director of the Career Center at the University of Oregon. And so as I talk to you today, it's kind of with the perspective of someone who's worked in a career center. I've worked here for about a year, and prior to coming here, I was the Director of Career Services in the College of Liberal Arts at the University of Minnesota. So I've got a couple of thoughts that I'll share in a minute, but I think a lot of my ideas are framed by the two institutions that I've worked in most recently. And I got connected to this conversation about purpose a couple of years ago when I was president of the National Career Development Association. And as CCA was working on the Purpose First initiative and the documents that came from that, they connected with several professional associations, including NCDA. I would say, honestly, it was one of my favorite things I got to work on during my year as NCDA president. And I really feel like there are ways in which the purpose work really energizes me, because I feel like, and I think it also aligns so well with the theme of this conference, you know, the equity and justice for all theme. Too often career centers, you know, we sort of create good programming that's there for the students who choose to access it or who are encouraged to access it, but they're often not, you know, too many students don't access it, and it's often those who come from privilege who are aware of it and who choose to reach out. So the purpose first strategy, institutions that are more purpose oriented, flip that around to find ways of making sure that we're intentional about building student career support into the student experience. And so Nicholas, if you want to bring up my one slide, I just kind of just a few of the examples of the types of things that we do. So we're the Oregon Ducks. So I've got my career duck there hanging out with us on my slide. Some of the things that kind of come to mind for me as I think about purpose and the work that I've seen work. Nicholas talked about early integration into advising of career conversations. And I think getting career assessments in there, some sort of interest or values, or just ways of getting students to kind of engage with conversations about their identities, who they are, and how that then connects to potential careers. At Minnesota, we had every single one of our incoming students took an interest inventory and talked about it with their academic advisor right during their first semester on campus. And I love the idea of getting that in the hands of first-year students, or even backing it up into the admissions and recruitment and enrollment process. Here at Oregon, we do use meta majors, which I realize are a strategy that's under one of the other pillars, but we call them our flight paths. So for our ducks, We have flight paths that help them think about, if I'm interested in scientific discovery and sustainability, there are certain groups of majors that we encourage students to look at. And so we've found flight paths to be a good way of organizing kind of the potential majors that are out there for students. I think it is so important for first year experiences to be there. And I would go beyond that to say they should intentionally include career components. Are we helping students get access to alumni who can speak to them about what they've done previously? Are we helping students connect with those career assessments that they've done? At Minnesota, I knew that every single student was in our first year experience class. They all had done the career assessment. They all were required to come into the Career Center. They all were required to initiate their handshake account and start to look at internships. I would joke with those students as they came into the office that I knew, it might have been early for some of them. And I would say, that's fine. But what I wanted them to know was that they couldn't avoid it. They needed to be thinking about things. My fourth bullet point there, I do think any work that we can do to get faculty to be thinking about how their curriculum aligns with career competencies makes a huge difference. NACE was one of the other partners that worked on the Purpose First initiative, and they have their set of career competencies. We also are using those here at Oregon, and I've got a group of faculty that's working this term to be starting to think about how to name those, and whether it's listing them on a syllabus or foregrounding them in assignments that students do, anything like that, encourages all students to be connecting their academics to career success. And then my last thing that does come to mind for me that isn't specifically one of the strategies, but I think is so important for all of us to think about is how do we connect students with mentors, especially for our racially minoritized students who don't necessarily come in with a lot of social capital of people who are out there working in professions who can kind of talk. How can we as institutions help those students connect with mentors in their communities? Folks who maybe are just one or two steps ahead of them in going out and getting into careers. That's something that we're starting to have more conversations about at Oregon. I don't think we're doing enough with it yet, but I think that it's one of the areas that I envision us really trying to reach more into in the years ahead. And then the last thing I'll say before I kind of yield the floor is that, I think career centers are important partners for all of you as you're thinking about these. Oftentimes, first year experiences and things go on in first year are, it's enrollment management, it's advising offices. Here at Oregon, one of the reasons why I chose to take this job is that there was a very intentional effort made to bring the Career Center into our conversations about flight paths and into our conversations about how we do early career preparation, because getting students started early in that first year is such an important part of career success. And so I feel like our work is helping students connect who they are with what they can achieve.
Very well said. Absolutely, totally agree. And the first question I guess I have, and it's going to go, it may seem totally against what Paul just said about the importance of career centers. So one thing I want to set the stage before we move on to other things. The worry that we may hear is that, now everything you've been talking about is students to careers. What about students who come to college to learn and to emphasize the lifelong learning towards this? Like, where does these strategies actually fit in with this? Not just simply a how to prepare students for careers.
I'll say a couple words about that. Since you're, because I don't think what you just said is antithetical to what I've been talking about, and so not surprisingly, I think what our work is with purpose, it is almost it's a fiduciary responsibility of us. We need to help make sure we're getting students connected with career paths early and help them make intentional progress along those. We want them to graduate on time with that first job out there waiting for them. But I feel like we have a role in both helping students be first job ready and also career ready. I think both of those matter, that we know the students are going to, once they get into that first job, it's a springboard to future success. And my understanding or my hope is that the competencies that the students learn at the University of Oregon are helping them get set up for that second job and that third job, the other things they're going to have to do down the road when the next global pandemic comes and the job market changes radically overnight. I mean, it's the students that are ready to be flexible who are well set up to succeed. But we can't, as an institution, just think we're only preparing lifelong learners. It is also incumbent on us to make sure that students are ready to succeed at that first job.
And let me add here, Nicholas, also that I think it's critically important that we provide students with the necessary information up front to make informed decisions early. The reason I say that is when you look at the data, even in the view of COVID-19, you will see disproportionate number of African American and Latinx students that are majoring in low-wage jobs, which does not allow them to have livable wages and being able to take care of their families. So providing that career information as early as possible and providing them with the information to say, did you know that this will do this? And what is the return on their investment that they can expect? And what are the challenges? I think it's just critical that career work be a part of whatever conversations we have with students as early as possible. Mm-hmm. And I think that would help us into, as much as possible, try to start closing some of these equity gaps.
Absolutely. And talk about equity and gaps. And I think that I was wondering if, Betty, you could talk a little bit more about, what you're doing currently and how does it actually address those equities or inequities, quite honestly, what you're doing at Houston.
So again, when we started working with the purpose work, we started thinking about the career paths, the areas of study, how we were onboarding students, where were they getting their advising, who was advising, and the experiences, experiential experiences that they were having, if they were having any at all. And we found that there were quite a few breakdowns there. And so now we're moving toward a much more strategic study for the faculty and advisors on, well, what's the regional labor market even like out there now for the students in this area? What's the region? What are the businesses and industries looking for? Are they still looking for this? Or have they moved on to this? And we know that COVID has changed a lot of things for a lot of people. So this notion that we can just offer boutique courses without some expected end results had to disappear. So we began to do a lot of studying on what's available for students. And then we started talking about bringing all of the department chairs, all the advisors. We brought folks in talking about equity. We had all kind of researchers coming in. We brought the Aspen folks in. We brought CCRC in to talk about, okay, now what does this mean for the students? How do we start closing these equity gaps? And it's a very simple conversation when you think about it, because the conversation is, how do we make sure that every student has what that student needs to be successful? That's a whole new set of conversation that we started having there. And it was a tough conversation to have because most people don't think in terms of my program is graduating this, but there are no folks that are of Latin or African-American cultures that will be able to get a job in this because they're not getting the certificates needed in this profession. So now we're taking a different look to be able to disaggregate this data, get it to the persons that need to make these kinds of decisions, provide the professional development that they need. And again, changing the way we advise students was just really, really critical for us. We were in a position where we were like trying to herd them in and get them in a class. Let's get them tested, take that placement test. What do you want to take this semester? Did you meet the prerequisites? That kind of thing. But to have just those sincere conversations with students, be it, and we started doing ours as a culture of care. Not only were advisors being a part of the conversation, but we brought the career advisors in and we brought faculty in, especially those faculty who were experts in those areas. For example, we would bring someone in from engineering to be a part of that conversation so that any student interested in majoring in engineering, so forth and so on, would be able to provide very, very valuable conversation with these folks, what skills they would need, where could they expect to get a job, how much could they expect to earn, how long will it take you to get there, do you need this certificate first, can you get a job? I mean, it was just, we had to do a lot of rethinking of how we approached the students and how we started the conversation. And we've been monitoring to see how it's going. We do see that there are some things that we're changing. We didn't even, at that time, we weren't even talking about the 15 to finish work, but we had to make that a part. This is an integrated process. Many of these things are integrated, they have to work together. So we saw that in the beginning when we were working, that very few students were taking 15 semester credit hours. And I'm talking about the full-time students. I'm not talking about full part-time students, but the full-time students weren't even taking the 15. We had not been strategically, intentionally advising them around how this would benefit them. So we started talking more with every student about, you know, if you take this number of courses, if you're successful, how this will help you advance your future. So now we've just changed the way we talk to students and how we interact, and also even with the faculty in that first year experience course that we're doing. We're making a very interactive course. They have to do experiential learning activities in that course. And then they're talking through it. They're looking at the Texas reality check. They're taking personality inventories in there. I mean, they do a lot of things to kind of talk through what is it that you think you want to do, and then what are the opportunities if you do that. So at our institution, I could just tell you right now, all of the strategies that were involved in Purpose helped us so much. And we see that those gaps are changing. We still believe we have a long way to go. Because there are other populations that we didn't necessarily focus on as much, like, for example, your international students, your veteran students, students that are on Pell Grants. So we're developing processes and conversations and professional development also to help close some of those disparities there.
So it's very much of an integrate, and I love that you say that, you know, that those strategies obviously don't operate in silos. I mean, they're so much integrated together. And I think that that's pretty much where at CCA we're looking at the picture that we had, like, you know, the 4 pillars, but their strategies are so much intertwined, especially when you're talking about institutional transformation, that you're trying to bring in other folks to complement and supplement what you have, especially when you're looking at scaling. You need to look at the resources that are available on campus and things like that. I know, Paul, you talked a little bit earlier about the bringing in career counselors and career center as early as possible. To me, that's a great example also of, you know, I mean, not everybody is able to, or they should be able to scale. But in some cases, the potential barrier is the resources. Like, how do we scale this when we don't have, like, we only have, like, let's say 4 or 5 career counselors? How can we bring this all in? So I'll talk a little bit more about that, since you've been very much involved with this.
Yeah, and so for us, what we've done here, so the Career Center, so I have what we call our career coaches, and we have 1 career coach assigned to each of our flight paths. But even more importantly, what we've done is we on this campus have kind of cross-trained our academic advisors. And so we refer to them as academic and career advisors. And the way I think about it, I mean, the breakdown is that the academic and career advisors are intended to be our experts on exploration. Right? I mean, so students do not make academic choices that are disconnected from career choices. We want them to be thinking about both at the same time. So those academic and career advisors in their flight paths are the folks that students are working with right from their orientation, right through their first year, as they're exploring career options and trying to come up with initial ideas. Then where we pick it up in the Career Center is as the students get closer to what I would term career implementation, right? So students have some ideas, but they're trying to figure out, all right, where are the internships? Where are the employers? How do I get connected in with recruiters, with alumni, with mentors, with people who can help me get out there and start learning some of the kind of tricks of the trade. So in the Career Center, we see ourselves as the experts in career implementation. So the students are really getting support in multiple places, from all of us trying to think about how their academic choices and their career choices are intertwined. So yeah, that's what I'll say about that.
Great. So I'm a realist, and I think that in some cases, may verge on a pessimist. But so, what challenges can you anticipate? For institutions that go like, oh yeah, but I'd like to institute, to implement these, but what are the potential barriers that you have faced? But obviously, how have you actually gone over those particular barriers to actually implement them?
So when we first started this work, those were some of the things that we did here, Nicholas. We don't have enough advisors to do this work. We don't have the technology to support this work. Um, you name it, and you probably heard already some of the same things that we've heard about why we can't do. But behind all the why we can't do, there was a huge push from our chancellor, which I think is really important for any institution to have on board your leadership, your presidents, whomever's in charge, your chief financial officer, and all of those persons to be involved to talk through. We may not have this, but what can we do? And that was the beginning of the tough conversations to have about what can we realistically do now. And some of the things that came forth was we didn't have the resources, but we defined when we started talking through the processes on how to get students to complete and where they needed to be nudged and can we nudge them, who nudges them, all those kinds of conversations. We began to change how we did business, which made things more intentional. We were much more intentional about it. And it didn't cost us. We changed the conversation and when we got in with students and when we got out with students. And I think, again, to encourage those kind of conversations, our chancellor was in front of us. He was going to meetings with us. He was there right at the table with us oftentimes. Our vice chancellors, our leaderships were there to talk about, we need to do this. We need to think through this. And we constantly kept the data in front of our teams that were working on this information to share with them how we were doing, what, where we were and what needed to happen. Was this making a significant difference or an impact? But again, the conversations were there. We did not become discouraged. We had purpose in mind when we were having these conversations, because when you showed your leadership the dismal graduation rates and completion rates of students at your institution, it changes the dynamics of the conversation. So I would say any advice to anyone, include your leadership and use your data as much as you can to inform conversations.
Yeah, I'll certainly second that. I think for me, the barrier is that, in higher ed, change is slow, right? I mean, it's hard to move this big boulder we're all trying to push up the hill. So change is slow, and that's the barrier. But I totally agree with Betty that it's strong leadership makes a huge difference. Here at Oregon, our president is very committed to this work. Danica Scott, who's our vice provost for undergraduate education and student success, is kind of a very charismatic, transformative leader who's really pushing us all to address the performance gaps that we know are there for our Black and Latinx students. And so to get us to be looking at that, but then to think, all right, what can we do? We've moved the graduation rate a long ways in just the last few years. Now we're also trying to pay attention to, in my office, pay attention to just cut the job placement rate or the career satisfaction rate at graduation. And we know we have a ways to go with those things, but having that strong leadership that's there makes a huge difference. And it is one of the things that I mentioned that I've been here for just about a year. And I attribute it to the strong leadership coming out of our president's office and our provost. I've been able to go into faculty meetings. I've been able to get this group of faculty together to start talking about career competencies. I mean, these are all new initiatives for us as an institution. And that's because we've got that strong leadership there that's realizing we've got performance gaps and it's on us to address them.
And one thing that I'd be remiss if I didn't say that, CCA does partner with a lot of organizations like, NCDA, NACE, NACADA, NEPC and NASPA and things like that. So organizations that can help, like, so basically CCA can help that conversation about changing the structure or changing the culture at an institution with the help of academic advisors or student affairs students or career advisors and career counselors and so on and so forth. So I think that, again, removing the silos and making sure that everybody comes together actually makes it a lot easier, because it is, I think, and the response I get is like, well, we don't have the resources. Like, well, you probably will never get the resources that you need. I mean, let's be honest. And if not now, then when? And I think that the institution, I think, to me, has a responsibility to the student, not so much about the existing structure. So how can we best serve students? And I think that Betty and Paul, I think you hit it right on the head. That it has to come from the top, ideally, but it has to be a culture change and a structure change in some cases to best support the students in this case. So quick, I'm just going to bring some questions here from some folks. So if you don't mind, Melanie, can you, I know Marcia Smith Blaine, I apologize if I misspell your name, had a question about high school, I believe. I can read the question if you don't want to speak in front of everybody. That's okay.
That would be great, Nick. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So the question is, how can we interact with middle and high school to embed purpose throughout public education? Students need to begin exploration early and to be able to see the possibilities that are beyond their years. So how do you see that?
So in Texas, we've come up with the set of endorsements that TEA is asking that the high schools implement at the public schools. And so at our public school systems, I think around 8th grade is where they begin to take those career assessments, and they have to confirm that they're going to follow this particular endorsement. And what we've done working with the high schools is to map those endorsements to our areas of study. We've worked very closely with the high schools and middle schools. We probably need to drill down even more to elementary schools, because I think the earlier, the better. We get students involved thinking about what career path they want to go into as they matriculate through high school and so forth and so on. And what we have decided to do with the endorsements in Texas, those of you that are in the audience, you probably are familiar with those. If they come with the endorsements, we talk to them about those endorsements, and we have them to declare those as their majors coming in. However, we find that many high school students, once they get to the community college, they really have new thoughts many times about what their life, they want their life to be like. So we go ahead and work with them then. But we start working as early, as middle school with our ISDs. And we work with, and Houston is so large, we have so many ISDs, and we have regional meetings with them to make sure that we're aligning our work together so students won't be confused if I'm taking classes, let's just say in one ISD that we serve, make sure that it still aligns with our areas of study, that we're talking to them as early as possible through their career fairs about what they can expect to major in, what their ROIs, expected ROIs would be, how long they may need to go to school. Does my institution even provide the resources and the coursework that you need to major in what you're thinking about? All those kinds of things we're working with the IS. And I think it's critical that the ISDs, the community college, as well as the four-year institutions must work together for these systems to become seamless for students. The last thing we need is for students to be all over the map trying to find things that work for them.
Yeah, this is just such a huge need, getting better career support into our K through 12 school systems. And when I was, so I finished up my term on the NCDA board, but one of the things that NCDA has worked on in the last few years is creating a credentialing system, including a credential that's focused, it's called the Certified School Career Development Advisor. It's focused on putting specialists into the K through 12 system who are focused on career development and getting an infusion of support into that space. And I think it's just a little baby of a program at this point, but there are a couple of states, I know South Dakota put some effort into a pilot program to get an infusion of school career development advisors out there. But I think it is such a huge need that if we can get students earlier on to be having these conversations about career, that helps them make much more informed decisions about the institutions that they can think about or the career outcomes that might be out there for them. And we want to get them on that path earlier, and totally agree with what Betty's saying about we need a seamless environment, a seamless transition from the K through 12 into higher ed.
Absolutely. I know New Hampshire, where my colleague Charles Benson has done definitely some good work on this. I think that the clear communication between the college and the high school, at least high school, if not earlier, especially also about with meta majors, at least like areas, if not specifically one particular major or program, but the area that they're interested in, I think is a good start for this. There is a question from Shelley, who does not want to be unmuted, apparently. So has anyone had success with adult or returning student first year success or success classes? So basically, does Oregon or Minnesota and Houston have had like classes that are courses designed specifically for returning adults that help with this?
So Nicholas, let me make sure that I understand the question. Were you referring to students that have stopped out, dropped out, whatever, and they're now returning? And do we have specialized courses just for these students that we're helping them?
Yeah, my understanding is like something like, a first year success course, basically, but for returning students. So someone who's been, like you said, stopped out for a number of years. Obviously, things have changed. They're older, mature, more mature, or we hope, have different goals and things like that. How do we support these? Do we have courses or specific programs for adult learners in this case?
So I would have to say at Houston Community College, I believe that that's probably our weakest link there, to be perfectly honest with you. I actually taught a class last semester in the midst of COVID because we were rushing to get things online, and we had very few folks that were certified to teach online. And I noticed that and I taught that freshman success course, and I noticed in that course, the majority of the folks in the course were older adults. I may have had one student in there that was right out of high school, but the course in itself is not designed to provide that kind of information to older adults. But I found myself anyway being that person that was there to help guide them through, because they come with so many challenges. Many of them do not know how to turn on a computer. They didn't know the difference between a Word document and a PDF. Those kinds of things that we normally take for granted. And maneuvering or just being able to work in a virtual environment was very frightening to them. And I know that this notion of virtual learning is not going to go away, even if we become, I don't really know what the new norm may even look like, but I do believe online learning will be there with us. And we'll have older students coming back. And I do believe that that is probably our next step, but we have not developed a specific course that would be designed for just the older learners.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately this is a question that I don't have good perspective on from the, if there is anything here at Oregon, I'm not aware of it, so I apologize.
That's good. And Bob Schalabo and from Mobile, USA, has posted in the chat that Stockton University has a pretty good program for this. So thank you, Bob, for that resource. That's quite useful. Last question before we bring in James and move to the breakout room. So we have a limited number of individuals who are trained. This from Karen Gonzalman. we have a limited number of individuals who are trained as career counselors. How can we bring that skill set to scale? Can you recommend ways to train academic advisors to help fill that gap? So I think, Paul, you touched on that a little bit. Are there specific programs? Like, how does that work for the cross-training of those two very different but valuable colleagues?
Yeah, I mean, so, my NCDA does have some training programs that people can pursue. The certified or the career development facilitator training is very extensive training. So that is something that people can look into. I think even just more importantly and more pragmatically, it is getting your career counselors or your career coaches or your career advisors, whatever you call them, getting them around the table with your folks who have a background and a specialization in academic advising, and kind of identifying what are the steps we want students to take at any point throughout their 4 years. Here we've been, over the summer, I've been working with my colleagues in our academic and career advising office to redo like a 4-year plan, if such as it is, where we're trying to come up with some of the steps that we want students to take early on, but then throughout their education. And we're doing that at this point just as an internal document for us to use as we are doing training of our staff, cross-training of our staffs, so that we can make sure that an academic advisor is able to go into our handshake system and show students where they can find internships or part-time jobs for the students who need a part-time job. We want to identify some of those training needs, because there's a lot that we can do just in-house if we kind of identify the learning outcomes we want students to have after their 4 years of interacting with us, and then try to figure out where that expertise lies on campus.
And just before, and that's something before we bring in James, just very quickly, there's one question that I think may be addressed to all three of you, actually. The question from Jim about the competencies that are not necessarily, aligned in nursing or programs that are directly to careers. But what about majors such as English, history, and philosophy? There's also in graduate that have powerful competencies that are career focused. So what do you do with it? So to me, I think that if you look at NACE's 10 preferred competencies, most of them fit very well with the liberal arts. It's about communication, working with others, and critical thinking, and so on and so forth. I think that those to me are very much aligned with this. So Jim, I probably would look at also NACE's 10 career or 10 competencies for this, and I think that you see there's a clear connection for this. So with this, James, thank you for jumping on board with us. So do you mind sharing with the rest of the folks here who you are, what you do, and the success that you've had so far?
You bet. Yeah, thanks, Nicholas, and good morning or good afternoon to everybody. So nice to see so many familiar faces here today. My name is James McCoy. I serve as the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Student Success for the Nevada System of Higher Education. And most previously to this, I served as an Associate Vice President for Academic and Student Success at the College of Southern Nevada in Las Vegas. And so it was in my work in the trenches in the College of Southern Nevada where our Purpose First momentum really began to take off. And I just can't tell you how much I resonated with both Betty and Paul, really testimony through this process, right? Looking at this from a scaled perspective, the challenges that each of these colleges and systems needed to overcome to get to this systemic change, this transformation. And also really looking at it from the integration. We've been talking a lot about strategies and the game changers and the evolution of them with Complete College America. And it's no different with these Purpose First activities, really looking at how each of the strategies that we've been so focused on over the last decade or more are truly integrated. We use the puzzle analogy in Nevada a lot, while we bring in the ideas around 15 to finish and credit momentum, and we intertwine that with academic mapping, and we overlay that with Purpose First advising and proactive advising, and we lay on top of that sort of the transformational systemic approach around career alignment and academic pathways and Purpose First sort of mindsets. All of these things are very much a puzzle, and I don't know that we'll ever get to the completion of the puzzle. seems there are new puzzle pieces added all the time, right? But as we do all of those things, really focusing on each of them, not just with words on equity, but truly focusing on why we are doing this for equity's sake, has become the mantra in Nevada. And I'm really, really proud of that, as I know it is in many of your states. So just very briefly, Nicholas, I think what I'd like to do is spend 2 or 3 minutes just kind of talking about some of the things that we've accomplished and are still working through in Nevada to set the stage for the breakout session and the office hour, so to speak, coming up in just a few minutes. In Nevada, in the Nevada system of higher education and in our community colleges within, we really focus on understanding the problem first, right? So oftentimes we get jazzed up about the solutions and we hear about what's working in Nevada, what's working in Texas, what might be working in Oregon, et cetera. And that's all really great things, right? That's how national best practice is informed, and we tend to steal ideas, and that's wonderful. But from a systemic change approach, if we don't truly understand the problem or the challenges that we are trying to overcome within our own student populations, oftentimes it even is becoming more and more aware that our students aren't unicorns. I say that often, right? Our students are very similar to the students across this country, but the folks who are on the ground, all of us who are making these systemic change pitches, we have to convince almost the folks who are going to carry the transformational change work from the bottom up that our students indeed aren't different. And to do that, we really need to understand the contextualized challenges we're trying to overcome. So in the context of Purpose First, we started this work in Nevada a number of years ago where we really dug deep into our quantitative data around the average number of credits that students were graduating with. For a 2-year college degree, for us, it was 93 credits. That's a 60 credit degree requirement. 90, a little over 90 credits was the average credit accumulation for that degree. We looked at the average time to degree, and that was well over 3.5 years for a 2-year degree on average. And then we looked at the average number of major declaration changes, right? So all this kind of quantitative data really set the stage. But where it really did it for us in Nevada wasn't just slapping up the beautiful graphs around quantitative data. It was really looking at the why of the data. And we were able to extract that why through a series of focus groups with advisors, focus groups with employers, focus groups with students themselves who are accumulating all these extra unnecessary credits and all these multiple major changes. And so really wrapping our head around the why is what helped us to understand how we would instigate the strategies around Purpose First. And from a systemic change standpoint, we started with policy. Once we understood the challenges we need to engage, we began to formulate and vet policy language that would require the systemic change at the institution. Policy changes around major declaration practices, policy changes around proactive advising, the intervals at which that has to occur, no matter what, like we're talking holds for enrollment kind of has to, and what would occur in terms of student learning outcomes in each of those advising sessions, particularly at the front door, at the time of matriculation into the institution, where career advisement, career counseling, engagement with career outlook surveys, we just implemented across the entire state, the Me3 platform, aligning the career to the academic pathway. And kind of infusing all of those things into this robust policy that would set the framework or the architecture for the strategies that were about to come. And so I'd like to be able to talk about in a breakout session here in just a couple of minutes, the tenets of understanding the challenges, the problems, the policy work, and then ultimately leading, in this case, around Purpose First, to the full integration of areas of study, meta majors, and working through the academic maps and the curricular alignment that's necessary to be able to have students make these Purpose First choices and therefore reduce the number of degree declarations and to increase the entry to the graduation stage at a much earlier rate. So I will stop there, Nicholas, because I see it's the top of the hour, and we'll look forward to continued conversations in our breakout session.
Excellent, excellent. Paul, Betty, do you mind just for those who, for folks who they may already know that they want to talk to you, but there are specific areas that you might be touching on specifically in the breakout rooms?
Well, in the breakout room, we will continue the conversation on strategies to help students complete. And anything that I can talk to you about and share with you, or you can share with me about the strategies, how they've gone, the lessons that we've learned, and what our next steps are. Feel free to bring those questions with you to the breakout room. Thank you.
And Paul?
I would say, it's, yes, continue conversation about the individual strategies. By my experience, especially, is in higher ed, kind of some larger institutions. And so where change happens slowly, but I would love to talk more about how do we align academic and career advising, and also how do we get faculty involved in these conversations. And yeah, agree with Betty that if you join me to chat for a few minutes, I'm happy to share, but I'm eager to hear what I'm eager to learn from you as well.
Excellent. So for those of you, the way you see that there are 3 breakout rooms, or if in case you want to stay put, and we can have a chat with different folks at CCA as well. So there are different breakout rooms. You can click at the bottom of your Zoom for select breakout rooms by yourself, or if you don't see it, or if you just want a little bit more help, you can click on the picture of your own picture. There's a little dot, and it says rename, and simply add the number of the room that you would like to be sent to. So basically, folks behind the scene will work on that to help you with this. So please let us know if you have any questions also. So please let us know again if you have any problems with breakout rooms or changing your name or selecting it. We're happy to help any way you can. So again, in case you're not familiar with Zoom, there's a button. So if you go at the bottom, it says breakout room. Simply select, click on it, and you'll see the different breakout rooms. Feel free to select one and join, and then you'll be transported to a different breakout room with those particular individuals. If you do not see it or still having problems, feel free to just either let us know in the chat that you don't know, or you don't see it, or you're having some experiencing some issues, or change your name, or just like indicate which room you would be interested in joining, and we will do it for you. We'll help you out. Okay, so I think that a lot of folks don't see the button. That's fine for breakout room. So we're looking at the chat right now, and folks should be and for those of you who are staying here, and feel free to have a discussion with us. As I mentioned, we do have some of my colleagues here. We have been doing work across the country around Purpose First about the different strategies. So if you have specific questions in the meantime, we're happy to help and answer any of these questions. we're working as fast as we can to move folks to their appropriate rooms. And maybe a little easier in some cases, like I said, the dot, 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 like hover over your picture and you'll see there's 3 dots. Click on that where it says rename, and based on that number, just rename the number of the room that you'd like to be switched to. So there is a question here from Nick Matham. I don't know if he's still here. The question about given CCA's history of encouraging clear metrics around performance, what are some metrics that you're seeing or encouraging colleges to adopt around assessing purpose? And I think this is, let me just share my screen. I don't know if that's going to complicate Melanie's job here. No, okay, great. Let's see if I can see it here. So these are some of the metrics that we're looking at, around purpose first, whether it's quantitative and qualitative. I think that the first part obviously is, where we're talking about the representation of students in particular majors. So that I think is the first start with the baseline. So basically the number of students in individual majors and see, the representation matches. Obviously, the momentum metrics associated with credit completion, the 9 credit hours associated with the program of study. Obviously, that's one of them as well. Students changing majors, what is the number of students changing majors? Is one thing that Betty has done very well. I think that's their early indicator, is that they have an assessment at the beginning of orientation, basically, and or even in some cases prior to that. And students who change majors because they have information are basically advised, and all the undeclared are basically reach out. So looking at how many students at the beginning are undeclared, how many students are changing majors earlier on, but also later on. And that could be a measure of, are your outreach and information that you provide to students is actually helpful, because then by the time that students actually make a decision in terms of their major decision, basically when they decide to declare a major, they do so with more information and are more likely to, again, stay, because now they actually know what they're getting themselves into, what are the competencies, what their learning outcomes are going to be for their the 2 years or the 4 year of the program. So, and this is from the Purpose First website, on Complete College America, /Purpose First. So all of our reports are free, and they're available to anyone to consult and download. So anyone else? So Melanie, I think there's one that's called Breakout 2 that is still in the main session. Probably wants to go to Paul's. And there's a room 3 as well, I see here. So all of you who are in the room, you do have the opportunity to unmute yourself, to turn on your camera if you want to. So we can have, a conversation like, what are you curious? What were you interested in joining this particular session around purpose? What are your efforts right now? Does that resonate? Is that something that you see yourself moving forward to? So please feel free to unmute yourself. Melanie, are folks able to unmute themselves?
Yes.
Oh, yes, yes.
Hi, this is Brandy from Michigan. I am really interested in the adult learner engagement, purposeful adult learner engagement, because we recently passed policy and secured funding for 2 adult-focused scholarship or grant programs. One called Futures for Frontliners, which targets essential workers that work during the pandemic, and then one that is that will be getting started soon. And then the other is just a universal program similar to Tennessee Reconnect. And so given, relatively high unemployment and recognizing how important, tight labor market demand alignment is for these 2 programs, wanting just to maximize these relatively new investments that we have so as to encourage continued support by our legislature.
Is there, what kind of connection do you have with, like you said, like the employers who have those competencies? Like, what's the messaging to students or potential students, obviously, who might be interested in this? Like, what's the outreach to students? Like, how widely, is it publicized that those programs and those scholarships exist?
So I think the state, well, and I'm biased, I work for the governor, so I think the state is doing a pretty good job of messaging around those in-demand careers, trying to outline career pathways. And we have available some pretty good labor market data that can be localized. But then how that's being translated at the institutional level is super unclear. We have 28 community colleges, and we don't have a system at all. So all 28 institutions are, or all 28 community colleges are independent from the state and independent from each other. And so trying to streamline or standardize that is challenging.
the one thing that I like, and granted, Tennessee is a system, but it is centralized there. So a student who's interested in Tennessee Reconnect and those scholarships and these programs go to that one website, and that website basically, you know, redirects us to where do you live, what program are you interested in, these are the institutions. So I think that in this case, even though it may be a little bit more work on the front end, especially when there's no system, community college system in place, but having it centralized at the state level might make it a little bit easier on your end, and quite honestly for students as well, because then they go to one site, they get all the information, you control the, you know, the information that's being passed on, and obviously the benefit of those community colleges is that, to me, that's a great pipeline. So like, please let us know what programs you have so that we can, you know, inform students about the programs that you have, how is it connected, the process to apply for those scholarships if I were to attend to these institutions, and so on and so forth. So I think that it's going to be more work on your end, but I think that it may be more worthwhile to be the centralized area, or the centralized resource basically to do that, especially since if you're the ones who are also sharing the scholarships, if it's a state scholarship, then it may make a little bit more sense to be that area. But one thing to me, again, is definitely sharing the relevancy, that, hey, one, we believe in you, you can do this, we're going to help you financially with this, and there's definitely that. So why should I do this? Because there's that job here in your area, or basically moving forward, you know, in maybe, you know, in the next town over or something else. But the relevance that sharing that, I think, helps a great deal.
Thanks.
And I'm happy to connect you with folks in Tennessee for, you know, Tennessee Reconnect. They've done a great job, and if you're on Twitter, not about Tennessee Reconnect, but also about their FAFSA and about their you know, registration and things like that, I think they've done a great work also with the whole reaching out to their students and potential students about bringing them back to college, and bringing them to inform them about their scholarships as well. So I'm happy to connect you with folks in Tennessee.
Thanks.
Anyone else, or have questions, or do you have any questions, other questions, Brandy? One thing that I have to say, and with that might be a little bit more worth it, or something to keep in mind with adults, is how does that work for them? So if someone is working full time, or, you know, part time, or whatever, how does taking that scholarship, or actually taking courses, how does that work? And if the institution is, again, only taking classes or offering classes between 10 and 2, you know, Tuesday, Thursday, that is not beneficial for students. So in a lot of cases, I think the conversation we must have with the institutions is really that, are you ready to bring in the adult learners back? Like, are your system or your schedule actually conducive to them taking classes? And so having a course audit, if you will, might be worth it, just for them to actually see, okay, if a student is coming back in this particular program, are they actually able to take classes and progress? Or are they only able to take one class because you're only offering them once a semester, or there are only 15 or 25 seats in this particular course, and so on and so forth. So that's the issue, again, like putting the student first for scheduling, and I think that's something that we can help that. Anyone else? Unfortunately, Charles, I think, is on another room, but if you have any questions about connecting with how high school, although George Brown from NEPSI is here, so I'm sure she'd be happy to answer questions, or anyone else have questions or comments. Because I can talk about purpose all day, but you probably don't want to hear me all day. And if you change your mind or still thinking of going to a breakout room, it's not too late. Just let us know, and we're happy to move you to a different breakout room for, with Paul, James, or Betty. So just either change your name or let us know in the chat so we can move you guys to the appropriate room. So Mia, any questions about, or Charles? Charles just joined. So Charles, I was wondering do you mind talk a little bit about the work that you've done in New Hampshire? I think that would be quite useful.
Sure. Like with regards to purpose and career aspiration specifically, I assume, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so just to give an idea of, what our system's like, there's, 7 colleges. They're separate, but working together as a system. It's a community college system for the whole state, serves about 18,000 students. And what we did is we aligned our advising function in 2 different ways. With specifics to purpose and career aspiration. I mean, there was a whole lot more to it, right? But one is, and again, I don't want to act like this is at all a silver bullet, but we introduced career coaching technology, specifically called Career Coach. And, I'm not here to, be promoting Career Coach per se, but I can say that having all of our college advising staff on a common platform for career counseling really helped to allow us to disrupt current processes, such that if there were things that we wanted to change about the career advising process, the fact that you're changing the technology by which that's happening allowed us to, redo a lot more training than just around a given tool, right? So that was one thing, and another was somebody had posted in the chat CUNY Gutman's Ethnography of War course. And we adopted that course at about throughout half of the system. And what's nice about that is, there's a lot of first-year seminar courses that, make sure that folks are college ready and start getting intentional about their academic plans in alignment with their career goals. But what that course in particular did was a couple things. One, it made that, that sort of pathway construction integral to the course itself. And then second, it transferred as a general education requirement to the 4-year, right? Which was pretty huge, because I know that one of the bones of contention around a student success course is, well, that's all well and good, but you also want to make sure that the student can leave at 60 credits and not take any credits that aren't necessarily counting to their degree program. And so being able to make sure that transfer to our flagship institution in our state was pretty critical. And I'd be remiss to not mention that we also made sure that students were able to then register onto semester by semester education plans associated with the career that they chose. We actually used EAB Navigate for that. And that was helpful. So the upshot, we saw in our lagging indicators around graduation rates, we saw increases, and it wasn't just because of this. It was a suite of reforms, but we also saw specifically a 150% jump in students declaring a specific major in their program code from these courses and these tools. So I don't know, Nicholas, if that's a helpful summary or if anybody in the group has any questions about that, but that's what we were up to.
Any questions for Charles? That's one thing I have to say, that I know you mentioned EAB Navigate. I know we had other partners, other schools and other states that use different software, and whether it's MC or My Majors or even Hobson's, and that introduction to majors.
Yeah.
That question is like, so you say you're interested in this major. Have you looked at these other three?
Yeah.
And that information and that discussion, even though it's purely, virtual and through the software, we've seen like students who basically change majors like on the spot, like almost like 1 in 4 students change majors by being presented with additional information about other majors, simply because now they had access to information. It was like, oh, that's what this is, or oh, I know I said it was going to be political science, but like, oh, that's not exactly what I thought it was going to be. So I love that, just the fact that here's the information, and obviously the software costs money, but after that it's automated, that every single student gets access, and is being engaged through that.
Yeah, so 2 really quick things, and these are kind of also questions for the group. Well, one is, tracking data on that was integral. And, by the way, quick plug, tomorrow there's going to be a session on data and being able to benchmark against your peers on things like this. But then second, and I'm curious if the group has seen this, is that with COVID, we saw obviously a lot of our students were essential workers, and but in addition, there was a lot of students who recently got laid off, or they had family members get laid off, and we saw a little bit of a shift to short-term certificates, right? And so then the criticality of making the pivots that Nicholas is talking about just like really heightened. And we were still struggling with that, right when, I left. So I don't really know how it all played out. I mean, I keep in touch, but I'm curious if others are seeing that and how they're kind of grappling with this during the pandemic. Well, and it could be something that, maybe, you don't want to talk about.
Just a second.
You could chat, but I'm sure that that's something that's experienced. Well, it looks like everybody's coming back to the main room. So I'll be quiet. Yeah.
So welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good opportunity to talk. And one thing, again, this is obviously the beginning, obviously, so we want to make sure that you guys keep connect. So please feel free, and I'll put I'll put my email address in the chat. So please feel free, if you have any questions that you didn't have an opportunity to ask to us, to our panelists, to our content experts and things like that, please let me know. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'll reach out and potentially connect you. Again, we're definitely interested in working with all of you on how to best implement these particular strategies and work with your institutions to transform, really to eliminate those performance gaps. So please let me know how we can continue this conversation. One thing I'll say, I'd be remiss if I did not mention the other sessions that are coming up the next few days about the other pillars. So we're looking at momentum, structure, and support. Same time, if you can, even if you did not sign up for them, in the virtual attendee hub, the same place that you click on the link to open this this session, they're all there. So please, tomorrow noon, join in to one of these sessions. We're happy to to connect you and for you to learn a little bit more about the strategies and how our strategies can actually support the elimination of the performance gap at your institution. So with that, thank you again for your participation. Looking forward to hearing from you and seeing you a little bit more in the other sessions. So thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day.